There he
Hi,
is.
Jen.
Glad to see you, Randy. All right,
Likewise.
well, I'm going to begin because the clock just turned and we're running a little small this time than last time, but I understand that completely. It's such a busy time of year, and I'm really grateful for the help Goodheart-Willcox gives me so that we get this um, videotaped and logged, so it will be of use to people, especially in the mentorship program. And welcome, Megan. We're glad to have you. And picture of your cute family. So just a couple of things first. I promised announcements. One is that the JEA has a Scholastic Journalism Week photo contest, and I'm going to flip. Let's see if I can share screen, and then I can go to, oh dear, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Maybe I can't do this. Get a share screen and go. It's not letting me go into. Anyway, so I'm not going to be able to do that. Let's quit sharing screen and new share, stop share. Okay, I'm going to give up on that till I get smarter. Anyway, if you have graphically oriented kids, there's a poster contest for the JEA's 100th anniversary. It's the contest closes on the 20th, but kids always do everything at the last minute anyway. And it's for Scholastic Journalism Week. And there's a $500 grand prize. So you might want to take a look at that and see if one of your kiddos would like to do it. The other is I'm not going to be able to show it to you, but I was going to try to point you toward a flip book that they all disappeared on me from pointer.org did. And I think I'll just save that for another time rather than do it badly and talk at you. I don't usually talk all the time and somebody else does the presenting, but because this was kind of my bailiwick, I'm wearing a couple of hats. So I don't want to talk too much at you or you'll get glassy eyed. So response and revision is just one brick in a successful program. But for me, it was the keystone, the one that held the arch together, especially when I was just beginning with my program. Each time I just began at a different school. Once you have a climate of response and revision and student editorial leadership, it's self-perpetuating. The program begins to run itself. But when you have to start out from ground zero, it's really hard to get the kids to do that well, or I have found that it was. It's kind of like yeast in an old French kitchen, that it makes the best bread, but but starting the culture requires some chops. I've never had a kid walk into my classroom able to create publishable copy. They all need response and revision. Even kids that got A's very good on all of their in-class essays for their English class. We all need to revise, to rewrite, to receive response. And that includes people who've paid the cookie bill as writers. Very few kids want to do multiple revisions. Requests to revise feel like punishment or like they're being demeaned. They become defensive, or they think you've got a problem with them rather than helping them with their writing. At least that was my experience. And they kind of want the teacher to tell them when something's good enough, which isn't what we try to do with journalism, especially since the students are supposed to have control of the content. And for many of our kids, this is the first time where they have a real audience for their writing, not just a teacher with a rubric or a scorer for a high stakes written test, an audience that they hope will read their work. It may be the first time they've really cared about their content. They weren't writing to a prompt or writing, they're writing for the first time in a real situation, an authentic situation for their lives. So rather than talk you to death about what goes on in a writer's workshop, I will say that the writer's workshops, which some of you know from the textbook, but we've got a couple of them posted on on the site, the Goodheart-Willcox site, the 411 site. The Writers Workshop can teach this process. Please help me by participating with me. And afterwards, we'll talk about what just happened and what we just did. So let's say we're talking about observational journalism and we try this Writers Workshop. But this time, imagine that you are in a faculty in-service meeting. And imagine that it went on longer than you really wanted it to, as most of them do. And that you looked around and you don't see very many people who are thrilled and engaged. Think of what you would see in a room full of colleagues sitting on folding chairs. This is what the Writers Workshop assignment should look like. This is what I want you to write about. I'm going to give you ask you to write triplets. 3 pieces of visual evidence that give people a main picture. 3 times. We'll talk about triplets later. So this is the assignment, is to just jot down and then type into the chat. Though the faculty remained whatever you would like to put in there, the presenter missed signs the in-service had gone too long. And you can see that there are, oops, I didn't do share screen, did I? Another genius part on another thing on my part. Let's see if I can get that. There's a share screen, and let's see if I can find that again. It was there a minute ago. I don't know why this doesn't like me. There we go. So there you see there's 3 little slots. So take 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to leave that up for you. Can't. I shared screen. What did I do wrong? Somebody help me.
So we saw it a few moments ago.
Yes.
When you were trying to show us something else, and then it went away, and now this time it didn't come back. So if you could do what you did before, that would do it.
And how did I hold my tongue that time? Did that show? Evidently not, because I don't hear anybody.
If you have multiple screens, you might have to pick the screen that you're sharing. So I don't know if a separate window popped up.
Well, we don't want that one. Did
Yeah,
that work?
That's it.
Okay, that's what I want you to write. Just scribble down something. This is a rough draft. And as soon as you're done, would you just look up at the screen, and then you can type it into the chat window if you'd like, and that would help us go forward. And I'm going to do the same thing, but don't look at mine yet, because it's really a draft. Don't think too hard, just write.
I'm sorry, at the risk of sounding stupid, are we to put 3 evidences? That
yeah, 3 things that you observed.
The in-service had gone too long.
For helping me clarify.
I missed that the first time. Okay.
So, I see them blowing bubbles, throwing paper airplanes, and playing tic-tac-toe, or, whatever you would like to put in there. And then just look up when you've got something. And you can go ahead starting to put that into chat if you'd like. No harm, no foul. It's just a draft. Randy, Crystal, and I'm going to go find mine and paste it in. I wrote it just a few minutes ago. Well, maybe I'm not going to find mine.
I don't know why I can't think of a third one.
Just put your 2 up. It's not brain surgery. Well, good. I'm not going to get mine in there. But so if I were doing if I were doing this in the class, I'd probably put you into groups of 3 or 4, but let's all play together if I can. And I'm going to look at the chats. Boy, you guys have survived COVID. Bless your hearts. There's chat. Okay. Randy drooling, one tumbled from her chair and the sound of snoring filled the room. I loved it. Okay, so let's pretend we're all in one response session. There is a format to how responding ought to be done. And I'm going to be very militant. That's not the right word because that's not my style, but I'm going to have you do this in a very particular order. And I believe in this order very much, so much that I'm actually still doing it with other writers that I work with. Now, let's see if I can do a screen share again. And there, this is the format we're going to use. The writer reads it out loud and the responders read along. The responders give specific praise. The writer asks questions and the responder gives suggestions. And I'm going to really kind of insist that that's the order in which it would be done. Crystal, may I pick on you and have you read yours? And we're all going to look at your chat screen. So we're all kind of looking.
Okay, I'm gonna like read off of, okay. Though the faculty remained worried, the presenter missed signs the in-service had gone too long. And then
teachers were
pacing the halls and eating their snacks.
Okay, let's start with a very specific piece of praise. She obviously hasn't been through some of the meetings that we have been, because you know that we don't quite dare leave to go to the hall. But pacing the hall, I thought was a good specific thing, pacing up and down. So I thought that was a really good specific thing. Anybody else have a positive comment that they would make to that?
I think both pacing the halls and eating their snacks are concrete visual, create concrete visual images.
Yes. And I like them because they're both parallel forms. They're the same. They're pacing and they're eating. So there's that parallel going in there. Crystal, what's your question about that? I can't hear you, Crystal. Crystal, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that I understood. And so am I questioning my own writing?
Yeah, what do you want? Yeah, you want us to tell you something. Usually when I read my writing out loud, I end up putting little X's down the margin, like this didn't sound right. What about this? And that I needed to ask somebody about. Like, is that the right word? But I know what yours might be, but go ahead.
I maybe shouldn't have used the word worried, and maybe like, yeah, what could have been a replacement word for worried?
Oh, cool.
If they're pacing the halls, which granted, like, you know, like you said, they wouldn't be pacing the halls, but if they're pacing the halls and eating their snacks, that might be like a nervous tick. That might be like something else. So maybe I didn't really like want to say worried, maybe anxious, maybe something else. So Yeah, what would be a good replacement word for worried?
Response from anybody?
So the trick there is to show us that they're worried rather than tell us that they're worried. That's the classic English teacher mantra: show, don't tell. So what would they be doing so that if you looked at them doing that, you would say, oh, they're worried?
Except it was a though they remained, da 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 da. Then she gives us this evidence, the pacing and all that sort of thing. So what would be a word that we would use in there that would show that they're
It's almost like they would say, though they were calm, they were
Yeah.
showing worried ticks or something like
yes,
that.
Yeah.
yes, they were twitching and ticking. Yes, yeah. Anybody else on that now that we've sort of got that? So writer asks questions. The last one is the responders give suggestions. And what would you tell her that she hasn't already asked? And I find that as kids get better at this, they already ask before anybody ever gets there.
So these are not suggestions that to answer the writer's questions. These are completely separate pieces of feedback.
Unless you wanted to respond to that question, it would be okay. If somebody brought this to you and read it out loud and said, what can I do? What would you suggest? How about, let's think of a third one. Oh, go ahead, Trip.
I was just going to say, to take your point about parallelism farther, you could make the worried, whatever verb you're going to use, put that into a participle too.
Oh, maybe that's the ticking or twitching.
Right.
Crystal, what would you do with that? Does that?
So replacing worried with though they were
Though they appeared calm, or they remained calm, or they placid.
Maybe they were smiling, or
Nodding
so
politely.
though they were smiling, they were pacing the halls, eating their snacks, worrying about tomorrow.
But that wouldn't be observational, but or worrying, twitching. Yeah, good. Can I get one more volunteer in there, and we'll just pretend we're doing a read around, which is what 3 would do. So Crystal, if you had to rewrite this, would you have something useful to rewrite with?
Yeah,
good,
for sure.
Who would like to play now?
We will, but we did the though part incorrectly earlier. But
oh, that's okay. We won't flog you since it's on Zoom. Go for it.
Though the faculty remained droopy-eyed, the presenter missed signs the in-service had gone on too long. The English department was quietly snickering to each other. Art was passing notes, and the coaches had fallen asleep.
Cool response. Somebody want to give a good piece of praise on that?
I'm there. I feel like I'm there. That's for sure. Very descriptive.
I feel like I don't know who Art is, but
I was speaking of departments.
Oh, the art department was passing notes. Okay, they tend to be just a little bit, no, but the coach is falling asleep. Oh, that is just so real. And the English department snickers. Yeah,
that's what we do.
Yeah. Yes, we do. That's really good. So I like that, very specific. Now let's see. The English department was snickering, the art department was passing notes, and the coaches had fallen asleep. So we've got 2 in parallel, and then a change up on the 3rd, which I think can be good. And rather than doing and coaches snoring. English department, what do you think? Is it better to switch to the past tense there instead of keeping going with the 3?
I think it works both ways.
Yeah.
I think
Agreed.
so too.
Yeah, I think it's good. Ryder, other questions? I guess I stole your question. I stole your line.
We were kind of rushing, and if I were talking to students, I don't love droopy-eyed. I wanted to like convey like that sedate feeling, but I don't love
Oh.
that phrase and could not cook something better up.
Well, look at what would happen if you did. Though the faculty remained sedate, that has kind of a satiric tone to it. Like you picture, the queen sitting sedately on her throne or something. It sort of implies that they're faking it. What other words might you use in there? The one I wrote that I couldn't find to paste in is docile, which also has a little satirical zing. What questions would you ask for writers? I guess you did.
Yeah, that would have been that was the big one that came to mind. And I do have a question. So like when you're teaching kids this and you're doing like such a small phrase, how do you get kids when they're like silence because they're, they only have 1 or 2 questions because it's a small sentence they had just done? How do you kind of keep that conversation going with kids? Do you get what I'm saying?
What a great question. It starts slow when you do this response format. And the first couple of times, only about half the class really gets it. But a couple of things happen with this. One is if the kid says, well, I'm done. And I said, oh, did you have a good revision? No, they didn't tell me anything. And I say, well, what did you ask? I usually front this by saying my best writers are the ones who ask the most questions. And I usually demonstrate it with something I've written. If I give them an assignment, I write the assignment and then I model it. And I say, I want the 3 most vicious kids in the class to be my responders. Ooh, I get to respond to the teacher. It's fun. And they all, I've never had anybody respond to me that didn't make my writing better, including my ELD 1 kids, by the middle of the year when we have to do that. So there's a lot of modeling going on. The kids will say, well, they didn't tell me anything when I ask them, how did your response questions go? And I said, what did you ask? But that takes some time. The other thing is the next half of this assignment, if we were doing it as kids in a group, I would say, okay, take all of your own and then come together and the 4 of you write one together, taking the best out of everybody's. And at that point, there becomes some more reflection on the language. And then the responders give suggestions. If they don't end up with a masterpiece, it's okay. When they've come together and done it in a group, then we flip them up on a board or on I was still using walls when I taught, but just stick them up there. And it's a chance for kids to get a good snicker and see their work published. And at that point, I can say, oh, somebody ought to do a little proofreading on it before you put it up. But I make sure that they know that that proofreading is not the same thing. Well, I have talked way more than I wanted to, and probably gotten not as far as I wanted to. But I'm really, really sure that if you will work on this response format on something that's low risk, where the kid doesn't feel like he's standing there naked with something he's just worked 2 hours on, that you will begin to see kids learning to respond to each other and receive revision and like what they revised. It's a process. There's a couple of things that are going up on the 411 site. One of them is an example of a writer's workshop, and the other is, and gosh, I wish I hadn't lost, for some reason, all this stuff disappeared. The other is a writer's workshop instructions that you can get that's also in the online. So I feel stupid just putting this up and I can't even see if it works for you guys. I need to stop sharing the screen. Okay, it's all in nice colors, but there's instructions on Writer's Workshop and there's a sample Writer's Workshop on there. And I would say that it doesn't come automatically, but it's worth working on. if anybody wants to do something another time on this, maybe just about Writers Workshop, I can help you. That was the two things that saved me when I became a journalism advisor, teaching 5 different preps in 5 different periods and pushing a cart around a rainy campus and trying to put out a school paper. The 2 things that saved me is that I'm out of South Basin Writing Project, and I do respond and revise with other writers, and taught my kids that. And the other thing that saved me was that I'd worked with Boy Scouts, and I knew how to run a patrol method, which was a lot like a scoutmaster and patrols, and it got me through long enough for me to learn learn a little bit about it. So I want to turn this over to you to find out what you do that helps build that culture of response and revision in your classrooms, or what other questions, issues that you currently have. I would love to hear what you have to say.
And just as an FYI, I did add the link to the 411 sessions, that page that you can download the resources that we just mentioned. And yeah, just to keep updated with these monthly sessions. So it's in the chat box if you guys want to snag that link before it goes away.
This was harder to teach than I thought it would be, but so it's a good thing there's not so many of you here to watch me be a little embarrassed. But I hope that it gave you an idea of what might work. But I want to know what's working with you guys. Megan, you wrote something that was really cute. Do you have a good process going to get kids to revise and respond to each other?
Me, I'm the only Meg here. Okay.
Yes.
It's kind of a common name. No, really, I'm working with a junior high group, and getting them to revise is like pulling teeth. So a lot of times we'll put the work up on the board as a whole class and walk through, okay, what works, what doesn't work, where could we have improved it. As far as doing small group like this, we haven't, but it's definitely something that I want to take back and utilize.
Cool. Look at the ones that she put up, because there's a couple of really kind of low cost things, like which tense should you have it in? Now try it in a different tense. The one I wrote, I had crossed, I had, I don't know, feet tapping or feet twitching or something like that. Feet twitched or feet twitching, just little low cost things that the kids can do without getting threatened. So anyway, look at those resources and see if they help you. I hope they will. Where do you teach?
Bryant Junior High. Justin's actually at the high school. I think he has a crew in his room. You're just
yeah, we're here.
We introduced before you came.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming. What else? Who else? Randy, what did you do? You had a culture of revision and response in your classroom, did you not?
I did not. And I'm wishing as I sit here that I would get another life to come back in again and spend another 22 years teaching journalism. My system was more based on the administrative structure of having departments, editors-in-chief, and then department editors, and then reporters in each department. And so the reporters met on a regular basis with their department head, and that's where the collaboration happened. I frankly did not do a wonderful job of training those department heads to collaborate effectively. I taught them a few things, about being positive and not expecting perfection in the first draft, and asking them what they were trying to accomplish and helping them accomplish their goals and all of that. But I did not try this method. Of course, I've been out of it now for 11 years. It's been a while, but I would do this if I had another chance.
And I think once you get a culture of response and revision going, I mean, I would be in the classroom, and one of the kids would finish and they'd yell response and head to the middle table, and 3 or 4 of the other kids would come over and give response. It just starts to work as yours does when you have older people there. But in junior high, you lose people every 2 years.
Right.
And Tripp's going to a new school with a new population. And it's hard when and I transferred schools in the middle of my journalism career, and I had to start over again. So, all right. Any Tripp, did you want to?
I was just going to say the program that I've been in for years, our normal process is, writer writes a first draft, turns it into a section editor goes through the Google Doc and marks it up with suggestions. I usually go through and make suggestions. Mine are a little, and we varied it, whether I make comments on the first draft or the second draft or the third draft. But my comments are more trying to teach the writer like how to write better, whereas editors are more just kind of cleaning things up. And so we're kind of lacking that culture of revision it's more of a cleanup type of editing rather than here's how you can make your writing stronger from the other students. So I will be thinking about that going into my next school.
So on this writer's workshop, which I know you can't really read here, there's a clear distinction. Forgive me for reading. Responding takes place after drafting and before revising. It addresses issues of content, organization, clarity, and diction, which basically you guys did in our little exercise. We talked about, you didn't have an opposite, though they appeared. Somebody didn't, they appeared worried. No, they appeared placid or something. So that would be content, organization, clarity, and diction. And the diction would be, do you want all 3 INGs? But that's the level for the first one. The person who's responding asks, is it clear? Can I make it more interesting? Is there a word I could use that would be more interesting? Do I need more facts, fewer facts? This is on a real story. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? How can I make this transition make more sense? And this is listening and reading together. It may be divided into 2 stages. The second stage can go back to word choice and clarity, but in journalism, you're often saying you only have one person you're quoting here. Those are good quotes. I like what you have here. What questions do you have? Well, should I have put his whole quote in or just part of it? Suggestion, you've got to have 2 or 3 sources. And that's that first level. The second level is the level of words. And then finally, the distinction between responding and copy editing or proofreading is big. Proofreading can only be done looking at a page, whereas responding is usually done through the ear. Anyway, it's there's another mini lesson on here. There's 2 pages worth. Take a look at it, and I would be delighted to do another session for whoever wanted to, maybe not even on this 411. If you wanted to do something, let me know, and I will be happy to do it, because it's not natural, it's not easy, but once it comes, it really helps. What else is going on with your programs and your people, Randy?
Before they answer that question, because nothing's going on with my program, there's one piece I'm not hearing, and maybe I just missed it. But one of the ways I'm keeping my hand in is evaluating newspapers in a summer program for the Nebraska High School Advisors Organization. And so I've read many papers over the last 9 years since I've retired. And one of the things that I find so often is I wish they had asked this question. The holes in the stories so is there a place in this process of revision and response where students are prompted to say, I would like to know this thing that you don't have in your story.
That's a wonderful question. And that's actually the suggestions. And I phrase the suggestion, and I have the students phrase the suggestion in that final step that the responders give suggestions is, as a reader, I want to know.
Good.
And that's one that, yes, I try to model. And I will say that I have to keep my hands out of it for a while. I have to make myself stand back and not sort of pre-grade it, because that takes away from the students' control of the paper. But I find that when kids get to be really pretty good writers, they'll come up to me after school and they'll say, will you look at this with me? And what they want is, they want me because I'm the most experienced reader in the room, not because I'm the teacher wanting to know if it's right. But I find that I have to pull back a little bit. Now, I often model whatever assignment I give to the kids, and I model them responding to me, and then I'll tell them, as a reader, what do you want to know that I didn't tell you? So that's an excellent, excellent question. Anybody else want to chime in on whatever, please?
So, like when you have kids who are pretty close in ability levels or middle to high, like I totally see this, but how do you kind of like gently get that kid who's like really low level and who may not feel, either doesn't feel like they have contributions, or the opposite, sometimes they feel like they have a lot of contributions and it's not very good contributions? Like, how do you kind of navigate that?
I think that's a brilliant question. Boy, you guys are right on. That's what the writer's workshop is. Ideally, it takes 10 minutes at the start of class once or twice a week. Is the writer's workshop models that everybody gets to criticize the other person? No, add suggestions to the other person's, but they read it out loud. They have to ask questions, which means they have to quit the, okay, I got that done, aren't I cool? You know, which we get from a lot of kids. And that it, on this low stakes writers workshops, when we're supposedly teaching triplets or observational journalism or tone or parallel construction for parallel ideas, all of which we touched on in this, and the kids would have done the same. But when they start getting that level of comfort giving and receiving response, you don't get the kind of, it evens things out a bit. And my students knew that they needed to go. I had a really hyperactive character who was our distribution chief. She had an IEP. One of my favorite memories is coming back from a convention with her. We were all exhausted from her because she was just all over the place. We got on the Southwest airline, and who else should get on but Jack LaLanne, if you remember this hyperactive exercise guy, and, you know, went everywhere in tank tops and slinky shorts. And she ended up sitting next to him. And I just would have given a dime to have watched them to see who drove who crazy. But the kids would go to her because they knew if it made sense to her and she got it, that it got, and that's especially true. There's a discussion on the JEA listserv right now about satire. I'm afraid get some of your kids and get some kids off campus to hear your satire and make sure it's completely obvious to them that it's satire. So I had just the kindest kids. And I think it's because one time we had 7 different primary languages in the class, and like 70% of the school was on free or reduced lunch. So I didn't have stars, but they produced a really good paper. I remember seeing a little tiny Asian girl, a little tiny Mexican girl sitting on one wooden chair together on one computer, playing computer forehands as they wrote. And it's because they were good at building a community. Immigrant kids are, but this process made them comfortable enough saying, no, oh, okay. And they actually had 4 hands on the computer and it worked. And I just felt so good about what they were doing. And then they got a response from somebody else. And I had kids that to the day they graduated were still dropping the S's on the single verbs, but they could produce good copy through this process. Anyway, I didn't realize this was going to be new territory for you so much. So thank you for your feedback. Anybody else want to? All right, we're just about out of time. Anything from the floor? I wanted to get your feedback on what to do next, and now I'm going to have to pretend I can find it after. Okay, these are 6 topics that we've talked about doing for next time, or we're not meeting again until, boy, am I a klutz. Where did it go? There you are. I'm going to put them in chat, and we're not meeting again until September unless somebody wants to meet in the summer to work more on this one. I would be just delighted. But if you would just do your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, I like number 1. I like number 5, whatever. That would kind of help us aim at our September meeting. And since you're the ones that are here, I would love your feedback. And it was it Justin, Mr. Turner? Would you, if anybody in your room is still with us, if they would like to do multiple feedbacks in there. And then does anybody else have anything? Yes, Trip.
We can't see your list. It's not in chat.
It's not.
I don't see it.
Not yet.
Well, I put it there and to everyone. Why is it not?
Did you hit return after you put it? There you go.
How's that?
There it is.
Duh.
Justin, I think you're muted if you're. Oh.
No,
He's
sorry,
talking
I'm
to
talking to my peers so we can all vote.
They can have more than one vote if they want. You could do Justin 1, Justin 2, Justin 3. Oh. Megan, you are a writer. I love this. And the teacher who always took notes was filling the margins of her paper with doodles. That is so brilliant. You are a writer. The sound of zipper bags being closed.
That's funny.
The back row scrolling on Instagram, and the teacher who that doodling in the margin is so. I wished I'd called on you to do that.
I just write from real life.
Yeah, and that's why yours is so good, because you've been in one of those meetings. Yes, I had certain decoration styles that I did also. You could tell how bad the in-service was by the decoration. Cool. Well, that's my time. Did anybody else want to share anything with anyone? I hope this was helpful, not too much like taking a sip out of a fire hose. And we're not officially meeting again till September, but you guys know how to get a hold of me, I hope.
We'll also keep that page that I linked in the chat updated. So come September, and actually probably come August, we'll have the new sessions posted on there and dates and times and stuff like that. So yeah, keep that link handy.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming.